Welcome everybody. This is going to be my op-ed talk, especially regarding kinesiology at Western. And so we're just going to do a little housewarming and just get to know me a little bit. And then I'm going to get into the specifics about what Western outlines for kinesiology and why I specifically chose it. So just introducing myself, I'm Shubh, and I went to Arendelle last year. I'm an IB graduate, and I'm a first year student at Western for kinesiology. A little fun fact about me, just as an icebreaker, I actually swam with sharks and dolphins in the Bahamas. And that's actually something, the conversation I had with this scuba instructor is what actually led me to do kinesiology. He's actually the one who introduced me to what kinesiology is about. And so that's actually why I ended up choosing it. Alrighty, so a little bit about me. As a person, when I speak to my character, I'm outgoing and I'm someone who actually enjoys the camaraderie and having to do things with other people. And so in high school, I actually was a part of a lot of clubs that engaged me into my interests. And so in grade 11 and 12, I believe we actually introduced a neuroscience club. It was called Brain Beat. I looked into mock trial. I was involved with DECA, HOSA, and I think for grade 11, I was the Deputy Secretary General for Model UN. And so aside from the clubs that I did just at Arendelle, I also did sports. And so I was a part of the badminton team, table tennis team, and the volleyball team. And so just when I talk about the clubs I was a part of, it kind of outlines and sheds light on what my interests are. And that's actually what exposed me to do kinesiology. Because when I look at what the world of kinesiology is, it's actually the science of human movement. And when you look at the science behind it, it's a little more practical and it's something that isn't heavily focused on the DNA and genetic side, but rather the physical application of science and how we actually move. And so I don't know if you guys have heard of a channel on Discovery. It's called Sports Science, and it illustrates how science, like for example, NBA players, the power behind their dunks, or how Ray Lewis can break through a door and how much force he generates. And that's actually the science of how we move. And so I actually changed my interests from high school to university, and I made sure that I was still involved. And so in university, I joined Purple Hands. I joined a photography club, a Urex research club. Currently, I'm a part of a pharmacy internship at a Shoppers, and I'm also a retail sports check retail associate. Alrighty, so a little bit about managing time and organization, especially in COVID and being a part of university, the transition's a little different. And I was actually shocked by it because the workload is significantly different. When we look at in high school, what we have to do, we normally have about what 4 or 5 classes that we were managing. And usually half the time we don't even do the work that they give us. But in university, it's actually significantly different because if you leave things to the last minute before a test, you really aren't going to be able to gauge the information and be able to produce. So what my typical day consists of in a normal weekday would be to normally wake up around 10 or 9. That's great because university actually doesn't have classes, especially with kinesiology, doesn't have classes that you need to attend in person. They're all pre-recorded. And so I won't lie, 9 or 10 is a little later than normal, but that allows me to sleep around 1 or 2. And I'll get a little bit into that later on. And so normally I wake up around 9 or 10 and I like clean up, I get ready, and I start work around 11. With university, the way it works is that they actually give you a time frame on when to do things, and it's done on a time to time basis. And I'll show you how that works, especially at Western, because we use this software called Owl. And Owl is what houses all the information for your classes, whether you're in medicine, whether you're in business. Owl is what you're primarily going to use. And so it actually outlines when you need to finish a certain lecture by. It doesn't matter if you do it at 4 a.m. in the morning or if you do it early in the morning. As long as you finish it by a certain time frame, you'll remain on track. And so normally my day starts at 11 doing work, and I usually work till 1 or 2 when I have lunch. After lunch, I come back to work and start from maybe 2 to 6, 7, 8. And in between then, of course, I'll have breaks. And after that, I'm usually relaxing and doing whatever, whether it be calling my friends or watching a show. And so that's actually what's great about university, because you're not constantly engaged in working. And that's not what it's about. They actually want you to do other things. And so that's how actually I'm a part of the club I mentioned earlier, which is UREX. And I'll get later into that and how like that's benefited me. But just before I move further, I'm just going to take you guys to the OWL website already. So this is the OWL website that Western uses. Once you actually, if you end up choosing Western, you'll see that this is the main screen. You'll have a password and login. So this is the main screen. And in membership is where you'll have your courses. So with kinesiology, I'll mention how kinesiology runs at Western, and I'll get into the specifics of what courses they outline. But I've taken biology, calculus, chem, kinesiology, which is a psychology of human movement course. Another kin course, sorry, which is introduction to psychomotor behavior, a math course, and a physiology course. Now, there are 3 courses on here that are mandatory if you choose kin at Western, which are psychology of human movement, which is kinesiology 1070A. There is psychomotor behavior, which is kinesiology 1080B, and there's physiology. So just to show you what I was talking about, how university actually outlines everything for you, if I just go to class lectures. So normally this is how it's outlined. We can go to what's happening right now. We're March 8th right now. So during week 23, March 8th to March 14th, I have to finish these 2 lectures. Now they're up to me. I can run them anytime I want, but they just have to be finished and submitted by March 19th. So that's just a little bit about how the website works. Alrighty. And the second part of university is how to maintain a good balance between academics and extracurriculars. I find that when you're involved with more and more activity, you actually push yourself to manage time in a more appropriate manner, because when you have taken time out of your day to be a part of a club, you have to show up and you have to be able to do the work that they actually give you. And so when you have that extra time throughout the day, you won't be distracted to waste time on Netflix. You'll actually make sure to use that time effectively through school. And so I know it's a little counterintuitive, but I find that the more I'm engaged, the more meaning and use I find out of my time. And so that brings me to the club UREX. It's actually a student research club that uses a software called Cobweb. And Cobweb allows you to model anything you want, whether it be from game theory and mathematics to hibernating patterns of geese or of polar bears. So that software allows you to model and modulate how patterns and trends work. And so my work with Cobweb has recently been focused around the transmission rate with the coronavirus and how it actually originally transmitted from bats to humans and from humans to more humans, and how that just continues, and it's a cyclic cycle. And it's really cool. And it's a program that you can join without even being in science. And so I know a lot of finance kids are in it. They look at the, I believe it's game theory, but I'm not too sure. And so whether you're here for medicine or not, you can join UREX if you come to Western. Okay, so why kin? And what is kin? So kin actually has a bad reputation for being the easy program to get into. And that's actually not true, because I'll keep it 100% honest. Kin is actually a harder first year program than medical science at Western. So medical science is the famous medical program at Western, and it's usually the program that everyone applies to. But when you're in medical science, you're usually taking physics, bio, chem, calculus, and then perhaps psychology. as a first year kin student, you actually are more catered towards the medical field because you have to take a psychomotor class that specializes in neuroscience. You have to take, and this is a mandatory course, you have to take physiology, which is also a mandatory course. And physiology is a course that you'll find in any kin program throughout Canada. So whether you go to York, you go to McMaster, you go to Mac, or sorry, you go to Mac or you go to Waterloo, you're always going to have physiology. And so if you really want to go into kin, make sure it's actually something you have an interest in and something that you know you're going to do in the future, not just something you're doing to cop out of the medicine field, because kinesiology opens pathways to chiropractic, physiotherapy. But if you're interested in that things, you have to make sure that you're fully committed because it's not as easy as a lot of your friends will say. I know, especially when I applied, a lot of people said that kin's just going to be a breeze, but it's not that easy. So moving forward, we're just going to do a little housekeeping. So kinesiology at Western has a specific requirement you have to fit. As a first year, you have to attain a certain grade point average in order to advance each year into kinesiology. And this is going to work a little differently at any university you go to. But speaking to Western, first year students normally have to achieve a 70% mark overall and no grade below 60. Excuse me, that's not the same at all the universities, but especially at Western, this is a requirement you have to complete. Now, at Western, kinesiology actually breaks into 4 modules, and that's something I'm going to get into later. But just know that if you're going to do kinesiology at Western, you have to make sure to maintain a certain average because you won't advance into what you want in the future. And so that actually brings me to the modules. At Western, you can go into 4. There's Bachelor of Science, there's a Bachelor of Arts for kinesiology, there is a Bachelor of Arts for sports management, and a Bachelor of Arts for clinical kinesiology. Each of them have different subjects to take, but each of them specialize in different areas. So as a first year, you're in a general program. It's just called kinesiology. Once you enter into second year, you get to apply into which one of the 4 modules you want to go into. And depending on your average, they accept you. So with Bachelor of Science, you get a science degree at the end of your 4 years. But with the other 3, you're going to get a Bachelor of Arts. And Bachelor of Arts is amazing because you actually get to specialize. So let's say you choose Bachelor of Arts with clinical kinesiology, they actually give you placements. I'm actually pursuing Bachelor of Science, and so I can speak a little bit to that. But in terms of the modules, these are the 3 courses that I talked about earlier that are mandatory. So you'll see that human physiology, psychology of human movement science, and psychomotor behavior is something standardized in all of the modules. But what makes, let's say, sports management and clinical kinesiology different from the rest is that you're allowed to take business administration, for example, or you take statistics, right? And so that is what varies you, or especially when you're at Western, the ability to specialize in a certain field into kinesiology is what makes Western different. Because I understand that Western kinesiology competes with Waterloo and it competes with Mac. And a lot of you might be wondering why Western is better, but this is one of the main reasons. Because if you just want to do kinesiology, Western is where you have the variety to choose from what you want to specialize in. I know Waterloo offers co-op. Western does the same in terms of which stream you pick. So with sports management, we actually have a Kennedy Fowler building. And the Kennedy Fowler building is open to anyone in London who comes in for any sports-related injuries. And so kinesiology students at Western are given first priority to gain upfront close exposure to how kinesiologists function in the real world. And so those are just some of the pros to Western kinesiology. Now you'll see that with each stream, you get to pick electives. I entered the BSc stream And the BSc stream is the most stringent because they have certain outlines that you have to follow. So you're required to take a 2.0 credit in the sciences. And so that means that you need to take a science course that lasts a year. So I specifically chose, as you saw in my OWL page, I chose bio, chem, and math. I didn't choose physics because physics is really hard in university, but not only is it something that I'm not interested in, it's also something that I'm going to be honest is going to lower your average. So I actually suggest you guys don't take physics, but it's up to you. You're also allowed to take electives up to a 1.0 credit. A lot of people usually take psychology, but I actually took linear algebra, and that was my other math course. Okay, so which program should I get into and why Western? When I was in grade 12, I actually applied to almost all the major kinesiology programs. So I applied to York, I applied to Mac, I applied to Waterloo, and I applied to Western. And the reason I chose Western is because they actually have a different approach. I know a lot of you, maybe in this call, are ambitious pre-med students that want to get into med school, but don't want to take the traditional route. I chose Western not for the reason to not be in one of the most competitive medical programs. Like, for example, McMaster is known for its medical program because it has health science and life sciences. But the reason I chose Western is because their approach to kinesiology is more catered towards the physical application in terms of exercise. So with my psychomotor class, we analyze how exercise improves sedentary behavior. I know at McMaster, the approach to kinesiology they take is a little more research-based. And in terms of who I am as a person, that's just not what caters to my needs. And so I tried to stay away from McMaster. With Waterloo, Waterloo is known for their cadaver lab in the second year. Western also offers the same, but the reason I didn't choose Waterloo is because I didn't want to waste another year doing co-op when I can use that time to apply for medical school. And so later on in the presentation, I'm going to get into how kinesiology can also feed into medical school and how, in my opinion, I think doing kinesiology might actually be better than doing the traditional life science approach. In terms of the pros at Waterloo and McMaster, McMaster offers more opportunities in terms of kinesiology and placement. So if you want to actually, during your years, go into a clinic to actually work with a kinesiologist, McMaster is more catered towards that. With Waterloo, I actually have conflicting opinions because the co-op placements that Waterloo provides are placements that anyone can attain. So if I'm a business student and I wanted to do a kinesiology co-op, the ones that Waterloo offers are ones that anyone can get. And so I don't think that Waterloo's kinesiology co-op program is actually any more beneficial than if I were to just walk into a sports clinic and ask if I can volunteer there. Personal experience. Okay, so with Western so far, we haven't had any in-person labs because Kin is more focused on labs and measuring how you move. That's actually later on down the line. But in terms of how I see kinesiology, I think it varies on your likes and dislikes because as a person, like I said earlier, I'm really outgoing. And that's actually what the culture is at Western. Western provides so much opportunity for group learning, and you can easily talk to any professor and openly ask if you can join their research. And as a school, I'm sure you've heard the image of Western is a little more ambitious. And so that's one of the reasons I actually chose Western. And I can relate to that with personal experience because I visited the campus 1 or 2 times, and both times it's extremely engaging. And that's actually something I look forward to in the field of kinesiology because you need to be able to attain that network and connect with people in order to grow. And I know at some universities like Waterloo, the science field isn't as expanded as, let's say, the business field, because Waterloo is more known for its business, for its computer science, those programs. Western also has one of the 7 medical schools, I believe. So if you do choose kinesiology at Western, you actually have that ability to extend your learning into the med school there. I know Waterloo doesn't have one, but McMaster does have a medical school. So in my eyes, honestly, I think it really depends on who you are as a person. And based on who you are as a person, don't go for the program, but go for the university culture, because in the end, really, you're going to get the same degree. And so I think what really matters is what type of environment really caters to you, what type of lifestyle you actually want to live. Alrighty. So we're just going to end off with the medical pathway. I'm sure many of you know the medical pathway. Whoever wants to go into medical school, you guys know that there's an undergraduate, then you go into medical school, and then you get a placement. But it's not as straightforward as you guys might think, because down the line you're going to have many road bumps, and based on that you need to know how to adjust. So when a lot of people after high school go into the medical field, they usually choose life sciences or health science. And the reason I didn't choose that is because once you're in those fields, you're bound to the medical field. With kinesiology, you have the option to not only pursue medicine, but also opt out into chiropractic, physiotherapy, or take the business side. So with kinesiology, you're not bounded to a certain occupation. And that's actually something I really prefer, because down the line in third year, fourth year, if medical school is something that I'm not looking into, I have the option to fall back on a business side of kinesiology, or to maybe go into physiotherapy. When you go into life science or health science, you're often held to the medical field. And at the end of your 4-year degree, you're probably going to pursue a medical technician if you don't get into med school. And so it's not as straightforward as you think your life in the medical pathway. And it's always important to have different pathways to take if you're not going to end up doing med school. And so that's what this slide kind of entails, because I know, especially when I was in grade 12, I thought I'm going to get into health sci. I'm going to go to med school. I'm going to live my life. But the reality is I didn't get health sci, right? And a lot of people don't, because it's a really competitive program. And so you need to know which direction to take if you're not going to pursue the traditional route. And so that's, I believe, overall what I had to say about Western. I know I was selling the Western kinesiology program, but it really does have its benefits, and it depends on the type of person you are. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. You can also reach out to me on my Instagram, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that, Shubh. That was like a really insightful presentation, lots of information. So we do have a couple of questions we'd like to ask you, and then and then we're gonna start getting some questions from the chat.
Yeah.
So we only have like 2 or 3 questions. So first question is, how do you stay motivated at university, especially during these times?
How do you stay motivated?
Yeah.
I think the environment you're in actually fosters the competitive nature. I know, especially with kinesiology, a lot of people are aiming to go into one of the 4 streams, and so people will often ask, like, "How are you doing? Are you caught up on the material?" And so it kind of breeds this competitive nature. And even though the competitive nature can be toxic, it kind of motivates you to do well. And especially knowing that the grades that you achieve are what is going to take you further and allow you to gain opportunities, that motivates you to do well.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. And then second question is, with the transition from high school to post-secondary, is there anything that you overlooked that could have been helpful? So like anything you thought that was important, but you didn't really do from that transition from high school to university?
Yeah, I think a lot of people stress the importance, the smooth transition from high school to university. There's always going to be a shock when you enter university. And I think a lot of people often regret not doing one thing or not studying something. I honestly don't think that there's something that every student has to do in order to make that transition seamless, because the workload comparison from high school to university is always going to be different. And so I don't think that I would have changed anything I would have done, but do make sure that whatever you do pursue, it's something you have an interest in, because if you're not going to do something you don't like, you're going to hate your life in university because it's constantly bombarded with work. And if you're not going to enjoy it, there's no point in doing it.
All right, yeah, thank you for that. We've got 4 minutes left for our meeting, so we'll just now move on to the chat questions. So first question is from Jatin. Is Western a party school?
You know what? Western does have that reputation, and it is a party school. But if you want to stay away from that culture, it's really easy to. So it depends on what friend group you're a part of. With COVID, I'm actually at home, so I'm not at Western, and so I don't know how the partying works. But it definitely is a party school. Is what from what I've heard.
We've got a question from Sharon. So actually she's got 2 questions, or she has got 2 questions. So first question is public health a career option with kinesiology? And another question that they had is, if you got into Mac Health Sci, would you have still chosen Western?
Okay, so that's actually a great question, Sharon. Is public health an option with kinesiology? That's great that you asked that, because that is an option with kinesiology. But if public health is something that you are focused towards, I would recommend health science at Western, because Western offers 3 different medical programs. The first one is health science, the second one is medical science, and the third one is kinesiology. Health science at Western focuses on the management and administration side of medicine, and it actually has courses about law and ethics in terms of medicine. And so if you want to go into public health, I would recommend health science at Western over kinesiology. And in terms of if I would have chosen Western if I got into Mac Health Sci, my first choice was Mac Health Sci, so I would have preferred to do that. But if I hadn't gone Mac Health Sci, I would have preferred any kinesiology program rather than Life Sci, because the Life Sci program strictly focuses on lectures and no application. And I think that if you're a person that needs to physically see how the science works, kinesiology is much better.
All right, and then now last question, since we've got 2 minutes left, from Arisha. Did you apply to IB as well? And if yes, then what was the supplementary application like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the IB program at Western is amazing, and it allows you to focus on the business side, regardless of what career you're in. I actually didn't do IB because I know that my future isn't in the business side, but a lot of my friends did the IB application. And from what I hear, rather than focusing on every single club that you were a part of in high school, focus on the legacy that you left and how that actually changed you as a person and made you grow. So I actually haven't done the IB application.
All right, so yeah, now we are going to conclude the webinar today. So thank you, Shubh, for that amazing presentation. Thank you, attendees, for all of your questions. I hope you enjoyed something and learned something new. Just a reminder that we have Laksha from Waterloo speaking next week at the same time, so make sure to sign up for that if you haven't already. If you would like to re-watch the webinar or watch any of the future ones, make sure to check out all of our recordings, which will be posted on our website. And please feel free to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at OppTalk Official for the latest updates on our initiatives. So with that being said, thank you everyone and have a good night.